أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين. أما بعد، قالوا أبا عبد الله الحسين صلوات الله وسلامه عليه: إني لم أخرج أشيرا ولا بطرا ولا مفسدا ولا ظالما، وإنما خرجت لطلب الإصلاح في أمة جدي محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. أريد أن آمر بالمعروف وأنهى عن المنكر وأسير بسيرة جدي محمد وأسير أبي علي بن أبي طالب صلوات على محمد وآل محمد. Awaiting Savior of humanity, Imam Al-Mahdi alayhi salam. My respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أعظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمسابنا أبي عبد الله الحسين صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. Our discussions over the last few nights are centered around the personality, the methodology, the prophetic model of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And we have stated that the mission of the Master of the Martyrs is to bring his community back towards the way in which Rasulullah and that era was, being that it was the best of periods and a time in which we should all want to be emulating. And as such, if this is the mission statement of Abu Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam, to return his community in reformation back towards the characteristics of that underneath his grandfather, our mourning and our commemoration of the Hussaini movement must also be to the same goal, in order to bring about ourselves to the reformation like under which the banner of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. And over the last couple of nights, our conclusions have been the following. Number one, that the Holy Prophet of Islam created a community that was based on a trajectory of growth. His community started at a certain point. He came to it when they were riddled with certain types of characteristics and traits, moral and many immoral. And he eventually had to bring them to a point, after 23 years of being such a sublime community. By and large, many of the companions had achieved that wondrous station. He took them from here to there in the space of 23 years. And so this sets out his own vision as to what he wanted to accomplish. In doing so, the reality of our Prophet was that when he managed to demonstrate to his community, what he ultimately showed to them was his care, his appreciation for them. He showed them that I do not reject this community. I work hard for them. And ultimately yesterday we dedicated time to see that when the community today, people around the world today reject Islam, object towards Islam, it is because of certain reasons that you could not find yesterday at the time of the Holy Prophet of Islam. And so there is a disparity between the way in which Rasulullah implemented Islam and the way in which we appear to be, or Muslims in general appear to be, implementing Islam. The fact that the objections that are raised today, such as Islam is irrational, Islam is violent, Islam is oppressive, Islam is backwards. We could not find such allegations yesterday to the Holy Prophet of Islam, which shows us that principally Islam should be progressive. It should take a community forward, not stagnate it, and certainly not bring it backwards. If the Islam that you and I are implementing is either stagnative or backwards by nature, then it is not truly the Islam of the Holy Prophet of Islam. This is something that you and I have to explore later on in this series, inshallah. Our discussion this evening moves forward as to how the Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam,
Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat.
Our discussion this evening moves the series forward. We have, in the last few nights, tried to understand how Rasulullah appealed to various groups, and how through that appeal there was no group that could reject Rasulullah except the aristocratic elite group of people. And so Rasulullah appealed to every part, every facet of the community. And in doing so, people would not reject him because they found Islam intriguing, because they found Islam beneficial to their lives. In order to understand this issue further as to how Rasulullah appealed to people en masse, of every character and every demographic, we need to be able to discuss the personality of Rasulullah, to see how he was as a human being in his own character. That whether he was speaking to young or old, whether he was speaking to white or black, whether he was speaking to male or female, whether he was speaking to Muslim or Christian or Jew or atheist, he appealed to one and all. And so he was someone that brought people together, as opposed to being someone of division and dividing people. When we talk about personality, it's very interesting, because often when we speak about personality, someone will say, I am me, I don't want to change myself. You shouldn't try to change me, let me be who I am. And often we hear this from our youth, that as they are growing up, and as we are growing up, we spend time to try to find ourselves. We try to understand who we are. And this may take decades for a person to be able to realize that this is my area of interest. This is the person I wish to become. This is the person who I most find comfortable with myself. And so often, as elder siblings, or as uncles or parents and grandparents, we often say, this is the way you should be. And often a person will respond by saying, don't try to change me, I am who I am. I listen to the things that I listen to. I watch the things that I watch. I speak the way I speak. I dress the way I dress. And therefore I am comfortable with who I am. When we say about the prophetic personality, we do not mean these sorts of things. Prophetic personality is the way in which a person emanates a God-centric nature, whereby when you sit with that individual, you are reminded of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not sent away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A person can be any type of person, of any type. They may be of any personality type. They may be quiet, they may be boisterous, they may be more funny, they may be more outgoing, they may be more reserved. But that doesn't mean you can't be a person who draws people towards the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The prophetic personality was one that anyone who came towards him, he did not place a barrier between them and their growth towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Rather, they were people who at every point could see a God-centric nature. It didn't matter whom he was with. It didn't matter which age group or which culture or which type of person he was with. He would still be with other people in light of how they were, but still he would retain that portion of himself that called people towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as opposed to blocking their dhikr and their taqwa and their adala, ultimately their remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now this is very important. The first thing we find is that every prophet of Islam had this personality, that whenever they interacted with people of any kind, they didn't put them off from God, they brought them towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And whatever character you are, whatever personality type you have, this is what we mean when we say we want to mold ourselves similar towards the personality of the Anbiya, Mursaleen, and A'imma, salamullahi alayhim ajma'een. Look within the Holy Quran. See the past prophets, and see ultimately how our Prophet and all of the Imams emulated that prophetic personality of bringing people towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in whichever facet or whichever circumstance they were in. There is a wonderful verse or two verses of the Holy Quran which are almost identical with each other. And both of these verses come to us from Prophet Nuh alayhi salam. Prophet Nuh alayhi salam is oft recounted within the Holy Quran. Our issue is that when we read the Quran, often enough we read it very quickly without pondering upon the verses, without taking time to understand, especially those prophets of the past ages. What relevance does Prophet Hud alayhi salam have to me? What relevance does Prophet Shu'aib alayhi salam have to me? What relevance does Nuh alayhi salam have to me? And so, when I read the Quran, I must understand that their stories are principles for me to be able to take into my own life, into my own format, the world in which I live in. Twice there is a verse about Prophet Nuh alayhi salam that says something very beautiful. The elites of Nuh's time would mock Prophet Nuh alayhi salam for his servitude towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As we said yesterday, how many years did Prophet Nuh alayhi salam call people towards Islam? 950. Now according to our narrations, do you know how many people Nuh alayhi salam managed to convert out of a total of 950 years worth of tabligh? 950 years of da'wah. Do you know how many people he managed to convert? According to a narration, a grand total of 50 people. Now you do the math. 950 years, 50 people. How many years does it take for him to be able to guide one person towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The people who came towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the religion of Nuh alayhi salam, they weren't the aristocrats, they weren't the elite. They weren't the bosses of the community. They were the paupers of the community. They were the people who were the slaves. They were the people who were not from famous families, rich families. They didn't have a great surname to them like we have today. And if you have a certain surname, you are more powerful than others. Or if you drive a certain car, and then if you have a certain job, you have more power and authority than others. In the same way, thousands of years ago, the people whom Prophet Nuh alayhi salam converted were the people who were considered as to be the wretched people from amongst the community. They had no say, no authority. And so the people of the elites mocked Nuh alayhi salam and said to him, "O Nuh, if your religion really was divine, if it really meant anything, if it really had some substance to it, then you wouldn't be converting these poor people. You wouldn't be converting the slaves and the nobodies from our community. You would have converted us, the big bosses. You would have converted us, the elite of the community, the leadership of the community." Listen to the response from Nuh alayhi salam. Look at his personality, the way in which he thinks, the way in which he considers people, the value of people. He responds in the Holy Quran by saying, وَمَا أَنَا بِطَارِدِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. I do not send away anyone who believes. The fact that they believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sufficient for me to protect them. sufficient for me to bring them towards God. You judge them by virtue of what's on their outside. I judge them by virtue of what's on their inside. The fact that they believe in God is sufficient for me to be a protector for them. And that's the way I primarily look at them. Our personality needs to be the same. Too often enough, in our communities, when people of a different sect or of a different faith come to us, the way we act is that we put them off from God consciousness. We send them away from Ahl al-Bayt. We send them away from Quran. We send them away from Rasulullah. The prophetic personality is one that says, أَنَا مَا بِطَارِدِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. I don't send away anyone who believes. The fact that they believe in God is sufficient, that I pull them towards me. I don't send them away from the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is huge, especially in light of sectarian tensions, especially in light of sectarian violence that is pervasive within our communities today. In our madhab, in the school of Ahl al-Bayt, salamullahi alayhim ajma'een, we have an issue of tawalla and tabarra. Tawalla is for us to be able to accentuate, demonstrate our love and proximity for anyone who is amongst the representatives of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Tabarra is for us to be able to separate ourselves from the a'da of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to separate ourselves from those who are the enemies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now of course, there has to be a method in which we do this. However, the way in which I do this has to be governed by something. Our religion has a certain philosophy to it. The religion has governing philosophies to it. The higher level goals of religion itself. As we said yesterday, one of the religion's goals of all of the prophets, وَلَا تَتَفَرَّقُوا فِي. Do not divide therein. One of the goals of religion is things like unity. One of the goals of religion is things like education. Things like bringing people out of weakness and into strength. These are the major goals of any religion. And so any issue within the religion has to work within the greater goals of the religion. Yes? It is like saying there are things kulliyun and things juz'iyun. There are things which are general and there are things which are specific. The things which are specific, they have to come within the generality of the religion. The generality of religion says keep unity. The overall guide of religion says bring people out of darkness into guidance. You don't send away someone who believes. Unfortunately today we have turned tabarra on its head. We have made our religion about tabarra as opposed to about the greater goal of unity. And there are many people, scholars or so-called scholars, that will come and they will spend their time focusing more on division than they would on unity. The reality is, Islam is to bring people together towards goodness, not send away people from goodness. وَمَا أَنَا بِطَارِدِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. I don't send away anyone who believes. What happens is when someone of another sect or of another faith comes towards us, we spend more time trying to separate ourselves for them and focusing on things that divide us as opposed to what separates us. The prophetic personality is the complete opposite. It's very important to understand this point. The prophetic personality brings people towards Islam, brings people towards Ahl al-Bayt. It doesn't speak in a way that sends people away from God consciousness. It doesn't send people away from the love of Ahl al-Bayt. And so we have to be exactly the same way in which how we deal with people. If my tongue is brash, if my tongue is rebuke, if my tongue is sab, if my tongue is curse and abuse, then which person wants to come towards me, let alone come towards my religion? The prophets of God bring people together, and this is how we need to understand our religion and how we observe people. The Holy Prophet of Islam, Rasulullah Mohammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, was exactly the same way. He brought people together despite their weaknesses, despite their ignorances, despite their frailties. If it was good enough for Rasulullah to bring people together, it should be good enough for me to bring people together. The question is, how did he do this with his personality? In which way did he manage to bring people together? A personality primarily consists of three things. The first thing is being able to speak to people at their own level, to being able to speak to people in regards to how they are, to be able to appreciate their reality and not just my own reality that I exist within and my limited confine. This is the first aspect. The second aspect of a personality is to be able to bring them out of their state of weakness and into a state of strength. From darkness into light. مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. This is the second thing. And the third part of the personality is to leave your fragrance with people, so that even if you are not physically in front of them, you are reminding yourselves in their mind. You bring yourself to their mind and they long for your personality. They remember who you are. You make an impact on them even though you are not present with them at that time. These are the three things of the personality that we will look into this evening, inshallah. The first aspect of the personality of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is being able to speak to people in accordance with their own reality. This is very important because we are all very limited and confined. The reality is, no matter how old I am only limited as I am. I can read 1,000 books. I can recite 1,000 majalis. The reality is, I am only the sum total of what I have accumulated. And ultimately, in terms of the existence of this universe, in terms of the number of sciences, in terms of the number of people that there are out there, I will ultimately be nothing more than limited to what I am. Even if I'm 50, even if I'm 70, there will always be a person more knowledgeable than me, always be a person more specialist than me, always be a person who has seen the world from a different angle than what I have. I am only limited to my experiences. Why should I think that I am greater than you because I have come with only 29 years worth of knowledge? It is baffling that we have this level of arrogance in a human being that ultimately has only got 50 or 60 or 80 years worth of experience and still thinks that he knows more than everybody else. The personality is one in which he looks at it from the perspective of another person. He sees their reality and empathizes with them in order to bridge the gap from where they are to the person in whom they are speaking to, in order to be able to appreciate the world that another person lives within. The way in which every prophet was that they spoke in accordance with the people whom they lived with. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this within Surah Ibrahim, chapter number 14, verse 4. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا رَسُولًا وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَا مِنْ رَسُولٍ إِلَّا بِلِسَانِ قَوْمِهِ. We do not send a messenger except that they speak in the tongue of the people. Here, this verse does not mean that they spoke Aramaic or Farsi or Arabic or Pushtu or English or French. It doesn't mean language, bilisani qawmihi. It means in terms of how they were as a community. The prophets conveyed their message in accordance with the way in which that community was. How they appreciated things, the world that they saw. Every single prophet had this. As an example, go tonight, if you have a chance, to Surah Nuh, chapter number 71 of the Holy Quran. A phenomenal set of verses. Verses 12, 13 and 14. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala recounts the way in which Nuh alayhi salam spoke to his people. He says, he describes Nuh alayhi salam, he says, Nuh, he used to come and talk to people publicly and privately. And when he spoke to people, certain people, they put their coats, their abba, their cloaks over their head in order to stop the conversation of Nuh coming to them. Can you imagine? When Nuh alayhi salam speaks to people for 950 years, imagine if you were speaking to me now, and in order to get rid of your message, I put my abba over me in order to pretend I don't hear you and walk past you. What a level of hatred and arrogance there was. Nuh alayhi salam tried to call people publicly and privately. And when he did so, they hid themselves from him. The next part of the verses says that Nuh alayhi salam speaks to them. And he says, if you follow my message, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase you abundantly in rain and increase you in amwal. Very important. Ponder upon this very closely. Now think about this question. When did Nuh alayhi salam come? How many thousands of years ago? Go back in your minds. When did he come? How many thousands of years ago? We have Rasulullah 1400 years ago. 2000 years ago we had Jesus alayhi salam. About 2750 years ago we had Musa alayhi salam. About 4,000 years we had Ibrahim, and about 6,000 years ago, or 6,000 BC, we had Nuh alayhi salam. These are various figures, and obviously you can dispute them and read into your own histories and see where you get to, but these are general figures that many historians will give to you. Let us say it is 6,000 years before Christ, or thereabouts, so around 8,000 years ago, in which Nuh alayhi salam came, give or take. He says, we are going to send, if you listen to my message, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send an abundance of rain, and He will increase you in wealth and in sons. 3 rewards. My first question to you, is this reward of akhirah or is this reward of dunya? Dunya, absolutely. What good is extra sons in akhirah? What good is extra rain in akhirah? What good is amwal, wealth, in akhirah? So of course it means we will give to you a reward in dunya. Meaning that Nuh alayhi salam tried to entice his people, not only by speaking about the blessings of akhirah, he also tried to speak to them about the blessings of dunya. Very important. If you want to spread Islam, if you want to spread Ahl al-Tashayyu', if you want to tell your youth, your children, your family members about the blessings and the benefits of following Islam, it is not only the benefit of akhirah that will come to you, you will also have the benefits in dunya come to you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase you in your rizq. He will increase you in your health. He will increase you in your nobility. He will increase you in your community. He will bring goodness from your soul, morality and righteousness. These things will impact you. There is an existential cause and effect that when you are good within dunya, things will come to you as well within dunya. Now, this is very important. What type of community do you think Nuh alayhi salam's community was 6,000 BC, 8,000 years ago? Think about this question. What kind of community were they? Were they nomadic people? Probably. Were they people who primarily lived off the land as farmers in some kind? Probably. I can't imagine that they had, New York skyscrapers, did they? What kind of community were they? They may have been a group of farmers that followed cattle from one area to another. They would have settled in small towns, and this would have been their life. It can't have been a much more technological advanced town than what it would have been 8,000 years ago. It makes sense. Go back to the verse. What does he say? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase you in rain. Now if you're a farmer, where was the story of Nuh alayhi salam? According to our ziyarah, where did he start his movement? Where do you go each ziyarah and you start and you go to the ziyarah place, and we are told that the ark of Nuh, the Safina of Nuh, started from here. Where? Masjid? Which one? Kufa. So where would he have been? Modern day? Iraq. What kind of landscape, what kind of environment was Iraq, or is Iraq? More desert, more hot. Correct? There are places where it is lush, but it's primarily an arid land. What's the first response? Nuh alayhi salam says, if you follow me, if you become Muslim, Allah will increase you in rain. He speaks to them at their level. What would they have wanted as farmers in an arid desert land? Rain. Then he says to them, Allah will increase you in amwal, in wealth. Now this is phenomenal, brothers and sisters. This is amazing tafsir of the Holy Quran. You will not find anywhere in the Holy Quran chronologically, meaning about any prophet before Nuh alayhi salam, the prophets that came before Nuh, you will not find any reference in the Holy Quran to amwal before Nuh alayhi salam. Why? What reason? Anthropologically speaking, anthropology meaning the study of the history of humankind, anthropologically speaking, according to scholars of archaeology and anthropology, the first time wealth, any type of trade mechanism was found in the world was 9000 BC. Do you know what they used to use as trade? Sheep, cattle, cows, crops. Today when we trade, we may trade in money. We trade in gold, in silver, in stocks and in shares. Yes? We have a whole economy of our own. Then, how did they trade? If you needed manual service or manual labor, or you wanted someone to do something, then they hadn't created yet notes. They hadn't yet created any kind of coins. This came later. 9000 BC is the first time in history that we find examples of trade where someone will say, you have a skill set, I want you to do X, and in return I'm going to give you 1 sheep, or I'm going to give you 1 cow, or 1 camel, or whatever it was. Because this came in 9000 BC, it could only be thereafter that the Quran commentates on wealth, on amwal, on exchange. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran said through Nuh, if you listen to me, God, I will give you an abundance of rain and I will give you an increase in wealth. Because that community had now learned to become a trade-based community. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet spoke to them in their language. The third facet, Allah will increase you in sons. Why? Obviously because if you are going to be a farmer and you have a farming-based tribe, what could be more important to a community than sons to be able to till the land? And so this was seen as a blessing for them, of course. And so Nuh alayhi salam spoke to them in this way by saying, if you are going to listen to Islam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase you in dunya with the things you need as much as He will give to you in akhirah what you need. Phenomenal the way the Quran speaks about this history. A human, a prophet, a person is someone who understands the reality of someone else. That when you speak to me, I will appreciate where you are coming from and your type dynamics. Let me explain further as to see how this works. In the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, can you show me how you raise the dead? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responds by saying, do you not believe? No, I do believe. I just want to be able to understand it better. I want my heart to be at rest. I want to increase my certainty, my knowledge of the way in which you, my Lord, work, so I can serve you better. Our scholars call this ta'aleem Ibrahimiyyah. the methodology of teaching Ibrahim alayhi salam. Why? You see, sometimes we get a Q&A, don't we? We have a discussion after the majlis or at someone's house. For example, you will ask me a question. Now the brother may ask the same question, correct? But you may both appreciate things from a different perspective. He may be less well-read, he may be more well-read, for example. He may be younger, he may be older. He may have a criticism, he may already be appreciative of something. If I just give the same answer to both of them, I have not appreciated where they have both come from. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't just respond to Ibrahim alayhi salam by saying, take the birds and slice them and put them on the different tops of the hill and call them towards you. He gathered where Ibrahim alayhi salam was. Do you not believe? I want to see it from your reality. Where are you in this equation? What have you understood from this? And then I will be able to give you a definitive answer in accordance with where you are. This is understanding someone else's reality. And so when you speak to fellow Shia, when you speak to our fellow Sunni brethren, when you speak to any Wahhabi, any Sufi, any Christian, any atheist, any Jew, any Hindu, any Sikh, any Buddhist, they all come at it from a different world. They have come with their own experiences. They have come with their own beliefs. They have only come with their own education. Why should you be able to expect them to be in the same place as you? You have come with your own experiences. They have not come with your experiences. How can I spring and start telling someone that Fatima went through this, that Ali ibn Abi Talib is this, Mahdi is this, Rasulullah is this, salamullahi alayhim ajma'een, God is this, you're going to hellfire. Hang on a minute. You have been educated through 50 years of majalis. He hasn't come once and read the Quran. How can you equate the same things in the same way? The Holy Prophet of Islam had this personality about him, where he understood things from another person's perspective entirely. He understood their reality. A beautiful example of which is when he was sitting with children. He would sit with everyone. He would sit with atheists. He would sit with hypocrites. He would spend time with Abu Dharr al-Ghifari on his own. He would sit with everyone. He sat with children. The narration says, as he's sitting with children, he's having food with them. Yes, he's having a meal with these children, 5 years old, 3 years old, 6 years old, 8 years old. As he does so, he notices one of them starts their meal without the recitation of the Basmillah. They don't say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Simple. Now for you and I, how do we appreciate the way in which Rasulullah might speak to children? He's a prophet of God. He has to understand them from their perspective. You know what he says? He says, right now, Iblis, Satan, the arch deceiver himself, has come and sat next to one of you to partake in your meal with you. The children become shocked. What do you mean Satan is sitting here next to one of us right now? And then all of a sudden, Rasulullah says, don't worry, Satan, Iblis, has just thrown up his meal. He's sitting next to you, he's eating with you, but he's just thrown up his meal. What does the hadith say? The children begin to laugh. They begin to chuckle and giggle. Because they're being spoken to at their level, aren't they? They're being spoken to in a child's way to give them the imagery in which they can appreciate. Ya Rasulullah, what do you mean Iblis came and sat with one of us and all of a sudden now he's stopped eating his meal and he's thrown up his meal? Rasulullah said, when one of you started your meal, you forgot to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And because this meal wasn't in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Iblis came to join you in your meal. He doesn't want to be with anyone that remembers God. He wants to be with those people who forget God. And so he came to sit next to one of you in your meal. But after I said that, you remembered your Bismillah, you recited Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. That sickened Iblis, and so he threw up his meal. He didn't want to sit with you. The children laughed, they giggled, they chuckled. Rasulullah got to them, he made them understand, he gave them a lesson in their own way, at their level of thinking. Why? Because they were children, and so he appreciated their reality. It's very simple. The personality of which needs to be one that appreciates everybody else for whom they are. There are 7 billion people on this earth that do not share your faith. They do not understand the a'mal that you perform, the culture that you have, the language that you are associated to, the dress sense that you have, the history that you have. Rasulullah, when he spoke to people, he spoke to them by appreciating the way in which their world was. This is the first type of aspect of personality. The second aspect of a personality is one in which, when you speak to people, you get the best out of them. You help them move from a state of weakness to strength, misguidance to guidance, separation to unity. And this is the way in which our Prophet was. We'll have to conclude much more tomorrow, but we will start this now, inshallah, to be able to get a brief on what we mean by the Prophet was someone who appreciated people and the way in which he got them from strength, from weakness to strength. A famous narration. Rasulullah had banned alcohol. How many verses were there banning alcohol? 3. The first one tells us about the evil. Another tells us not to come to the prayer in a state of intoxication. And the third eventually outright banned alcohol. Why? Because this was a community that was swimming in alcohol. A community that was used to drinking alcohol. And as such, to ban alcohol outright altogether, when the community would react badly to it, would be inconsistent with wisdom. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped them wean themselves off this bad habit in order to arrive at a point whereby they no longer had to rely on alcohol. Now, of course, this is a large community. Some people are strong, some people are weak. Not everybody managed to get off alcohol straight away. One companion came towards Rasulullah and said to him, Ya Rasulullah, I am still drinking alcohol. I can't stop. I can't get rid of this addiction that I have in drinking alcohol. Rasulullah said, please give it up. He said, I can't. I just can't. When I go home and I'm on my own, I drink. When I can sneak a drink, I do so. Rasulullah said, okay, if you won't give up alcohol for me, what will you give up for me? Listen to these words. Understand the personality of a prophet. Think about how we as a community might react to an individual who came to us with the same situation. He says, if you can't give up alcohol for me, what will you give up? He says, Ya Rasulullah, whatever you want, tell me, I will give up anything you want. Just tell me, it's done. He says, okay, give up lying for me. No problem, Rasulullah, done. I won't lie from here on end, you will make sure not say a single lie. So the man goes home as normal and drinks. The next day, he goes towards the masjid, he goes towards Masjid Haram, Masjid Nabawi, sorry, he goes towards Masjid Nabawi, and he sees the companions. Companions are all sitting together, and they're talking amongst each other. And each one is saying what good deeds they have done for the day. So one person says, I went with Rasulullah to such and such a place. Another person says, I was fasting today. And eventually it came to this man, the alcoholic's turn. So they turned to him and said, such and such, what have you been doing today? Now the man has promised not to lie. He has sworn that he will not lie, and that is something that he has to stick to. And so he has the choice of saying and admitting to those people that I have been drinking today, or not. But he can't lie. What does he do? He gets up and excuses himself. He runs towards the house of Rasulullah. He opens the door. Ya Rasulullah, I have given up drinking from now on. I can't do it. I'm going to stop drinking. My companion, why? Because I couldn't bear the embarrassment of sitting with my companions. They have all been listing the good deeds that they have been doing today. If I was to say what I have been doing, I would have to admit in public and ruin my reputation that I have been drinking today. You see, Rasulullah had such a personality that someone in that city who had been doing a haram act when the rest of the community had stopped doing it, when God had banned it, yet he felt confident enough to come to Rasulullah and speak to him about his weaknesses. Whereas he trusted that Rasulullah wouldn't come and lash him, Rasulullah wouldn't excommunicate him from the community, Rasulullah wouldn't embarrass him for his sin, he would appreciate this individual's weakness and help him go from a state of weakness to a state of strength. I ask you a simple question. Do we have that in our communities? Do we have that at all? A youth doesn't come to the mosque. What do I think about him? A youth is downstairs running around, enjoying himself. What do I think about him? Person doesn't come with hijab. What do I say about them? Am I going to assist the person in helping their spirituality, in helping them become the person they want to, or am I going to put them down and help them become a worse person? It's entirely in my hands. I have that in my way. And so I have the decision when another Shia, when a Sunni, when a Christian, when a Jew comes to me, as to how I react to that person, as to whether I act like Rasulullah, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً. We did not send you to the world except to be a mercy to the universe. This is how you are in your personality. Now you see the complete opposition of this taking place today with ISIS. What happens in Syria? What happens in Iraq? What are they trying to do in Lebanon? What are they going to try to do tomorrow in Jordan? Where is the mercy? Where is the helping of a community? Where is the movement from weakness into strength? Where is bringing people to a state of godliness? Which prophet are you following? فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ? Where are you going? Reality is, we have to understand our prophet properly. And so when we live through him, when we present him to the world, this is that prophet that we want to demonstrate to the rest of the world. Tomorrow, inshallah, we will continue on with the prophetic personality, to appreciate the way in which he was with people, the way in which we want to be with people. Reality is, as Nuh alayhi salam said, وَمَا أَنَا بِطَارِدِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. We do not send away anyone who believes. We bring people towards us as opposed to pushing them away. I want to take a moment and give you a story before we go into the maqtal. We have seen over the last few nights, today, every night inshallah, the youngsters coming up and reciting lines of poetry, giving us the biography and the maqatil, the events of Karbala. May Allah bless these children, truly, and may we help them and encourage them. Because those who are the khaddam of Hussain ibn Ali alayhi salam have a special daraja on the Day of Judgment, the like of whom cannot be met with, the like of whom have no equivalent. There is a story that was related to us, which I wish to relate to you, and in light of this story, see the khaddam of Hussain ibn Ali on the 10th of Muharram. This story is related by Ayatollah Sayyid Murtada Qazwini. May Allah grant him a long life. Many of us will know Sayyid Murtada leads Salat al-Maghribain every day in the Haram of Hussain ibn Ali alayhi salam, and immediately after gives a dars on the pulpit. And so Sayyid Murtada says this story. Because one day there was a marja. He doesn't say which marja, but he specifically says marja, not just an alim of normal repute, marja. He says there was a marja, and every day he used to go and teach dars. And one day he decided to change all of a sudden his way of dars. He comes the next morning and opens a book of poetry, the Musiba of Hussain ibn Ali salamullahi alayhi, and begins his dars by reciting from a tragedy of the 10th of Muharram. So his class asked him, say, Sayyidina, you are a teacher. You do not recite for us. You're not someone who recites the maqtal. You come and you give to us dars of fiqh or usul or tafasir. We have not seen you open and start your lesson by reciting maqatil. Why have you done this? Sayyid Murtada says the marja begins to cry, and he says, I had a dream last night. And in that dream, I was standing on the Day of Judgment. And it now came to the time when we were all to be giving our book of deeds, we were to be interrogated, and we were all to be going through to the destinations of hell or heaven. And I saw on this moment where people are now giving their account of deeds, there is a long line of people, but this line is moving very quickly. There is almost no accounting. It is so quick that the person comes to the beginning of the line and immediately the malaika enter them into the gates of paradise. And so I longed to be in this queue that had such a short accounting and to go through to the gates of Jannah. So I joined the end of the queue. No sooner had I joined the end of the queue to enter, an angel came to me and said, this is not a line for you. You must go in a different line. I said, what do you mean? He said, this is a line for the khuddam of Aba Abdullah al-Hussain. Those who recited the elegies, those who recited the poetry, those who brought people to tears. This is not your line. You go in a different line. And the angel took me, the marja says, took me to the line of the maraji and the ulama. And this line was very slow. There was much accounting to take place. Long accounting. The marja says, in my dream, do you know who took account of us? Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam took the book of deeds of the ulama, and he was looking. But our line was very, very small, very, very slow. And this line, which was very long, was the one going very, very quickly. And so I woke up in a state of sweat, trepidation, saying to myself how I longed to be in that line as opposed to this line. And so now every morning I have taken it upon myself that I will start my lesson by reciting the elegies of Aba Abdullah al-Hussain. Those youth that came and will come to recite, let us encourage them every night to recite. Let us help them become practicers of reciting Nawha, Ma'tam, Latmiya, so they are on that path that on the Day of Judgment, they are immediately entering into the gates of paradise. بِحَقِّ Aba Abdullah al-Hussain alayhi salam. Now, the first and foremost of the khuddam of Hussain ibn Ali were on the 10th of Muharram. The night falls, the night of Ashura. The night of Ashura is a night like no other. We hear that there is that buzzing of the recitation of Quran, the recitation of Salah, the recitation of Tasbihat coming from that camp. Yesterday we spoke about the narration of Nafi ibn Hilal, whereby he enters into the battlefield following Hussain ibn Ali. And Hussain ibn Ali turns around towards him and says, "Oh Nafi, why is it that you are following me?" He says, "Because I feared that someone would come and strike you in the darkness of the night. And so I wanted to walk behind you step by step in order to serve you, in order to follow you so that no harm would be coming towards you." Nafi narrates that after having returned back from the battlefield, I heard Hussain ibn Ali enter into his tent, whereby waiting for him was his sister Sayyida Zainab. Zainab turned towards him and says, "Oh my dear brother Hussain, tell me, are the companions, are they ready to die for us tomorrow or not?" Hussain ibn Ali turned towards his sister. I overheard this conversation in the night. He says, Hussain turned towards his sister Sayyida Zainab and said, "Oh Zainab, I have tested our companions. They are more eager to die for me, more eager to serve me than a baby is eager for the bosom of its mother. Do not worry, Zainab, tomorrow you will not find anyone who is not with us. They will all follow me and they will all serve you till the last drop." At this moment, my heart shook, and Nafi says, my heart shook, and I imagined what was going through the heart of Sayyida Zainab, how she felt alone, and how she wondered whether we would stay with her tomorrow or not. And so I went into the camp, and I went and found Habib ibn Madahir. And I said, "Oh Habib, this is what I have just heard in the camp of Hussain. Sayyida Zainab is asking about us. Oh Habib, how do you feel about this question?" Habib gathered all of the men, all of the companions from inside all of the tents and gathered them outside the ladies' tents and said, "Oh women folk of Ahlul Bayt, oh women and daughters of Rasulullah, fear not. If you have any worry as to how we will be tomorrow on the 10th of Muharram, know that we will be serving you. We will not resheathe our swords until it has struck at the enemies. We will not allow our spears to fall to the ground unless and until they have severed the hearts of our enemies. And you will find us serving you, O women of Rasulullah." The women of Rasulullah began to cry. They began to say to themselves, "How thankful we are for having servants to my brother Abu Abdullah in this way." Later on in that night, it is said that Sayyida Zainab, she was walking between some of the tents. As she did so, she walked past the tent of Abu Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam. As she did so, she heard Abbas speaking. What did Abbas say? Abbas had gathered all of Banu Hashim into his tent. He turns towards them and says, "Oh my sons and oh my cousins, oh members of Banu Hashim and members of Ahlul Bayt, tomorrow as the battle rages on, I want you to be the first to enter into the battlefields, because I do not want history to say that Banu Hashim preserved their lives whilst the companions had died first." Sayyida Zainab listened towards this and she cried and was grateful for the servants to Hussain ibn Ali. She walks past another tent, and as she comes to another tent, she hears that this is the tent with the companions. This is led by Muslim ibn Awsaja. This is led by Habib ibn Madahir. And she overhears Habib saying, "Oh companions of Abu Abdullah al-Hussain, tomorrow when the battle rages, we want you to be first. Go and give your lives first, lest history says that we allowed Banu Hashim to give their lives for Hussain ibn Ali. We will be the first to die before anyone else." Later on, during that night, it is said that Sayyida Zainab's sister, Sayyida Kulthum, was sitting alone in her tent. Kulthum, it is said that she had not married and she had not had any children. She was listening to the other tents. She heard Farwa preparing her son Qasim. She heard Zainab preparing her two sons, Own and Mohammad. She heard Layla preparing Akbar. But she had no one to give in the way of Hussein ibn Ali. So she begins to cry. Her brother Abbas enters into the tent and says, "Oh my dear sister, why is it that you are crying?" She says, "I am crying because I have no one to give in the way of Hussein, my brother, tomorrow. Abbas, how shall I stand in front of my mother Fatima al-Zahra if I do not have anyone to give to her tomorrow? If I do not have anyone that I have sacrificed for her?" Abbas sits down beside his sister and says, "Oh Kulthum, do not cry. You have no reason to be ashamed before Fatima al-Zahra. Tomorrow I, Abbas, will become your servant. Tomorrow I, Abbas, will become your sacrifice in the way of Hussein ibn Ali." ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the reappearance of the awaited Saviour, to allow us to be alongside Him at all times in our life and in our death, if not to pass away from this world before His coming, to raise us from our graves so that we may partake in the victory of Muhammad and Muhammad. Ya Allah, there are many people around the world going through such desperate times. Grant them all safety, security and victory for the sake of Muhammad and Muhammad. And we ask you, Ya Allah, allow us the opportunity of the ziyarah of Hussein ibn Ali this year and every year. Fatima Hussein, Ya Hussein.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein,
Ya
Ya
Hussein,
Hussein,
Ya Hussein,
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein.